Mother has a reputation hereabouts as a seer and prophetess. What she is a Catholic Gnostic. Though she believes in God, she also relies on her crystal ball. She actually has a crystal ball, which she looks into, and her gift for seeing signs and divining hidden meanings. But she is quite brisk about it, puts on no psychic airs, has no truck with seances and such. Her clairvoyant powers have rather to do with business and politics. She will not close a deal with a Leo in May. Most of her visions and dreams are about plots of the lefts against the knotheads. She predicted 4 out of the last 5 assassinations. Don't ask me how it happens, she chides her admirers. All I know is it does. Why, I would no more sell a Capricorn to a Cancer than fly to the moon, because I know what happens when I do. I not only lose the sale, but also the deposit. She is referring to the astrology of the vendor and the vendee. And I also know, without knowing how it happens, that when I'm saying the 3rd decade of the rosary on the 3rd day of a novena, and when I come to the 3rd bead, I'm going to see something. Don't ask me why, she cries, laughing at herself. When she says see, she means it. Last year she saw a vision of a dragon fighting a bear over the statue of the infant Jesus of Prague. To be specific, over the little globe the infant Jesus held. War between Russia and China broke out the next week. Her fame is spreading. Marva, it's a gift from God, her friends tell her. Why don't you share it with the world? But she laughs it off. She doesn't even interpret her visions, leaving that to others. But the meanings are clear to her friends, and they usually have political overtones, auguring ill for conservatives and good for liberals. On the eve of the last national election, for example, she came to the 3rd bead of the 3rd decade of her rosary and saw Old Glory, the Stars and Stripes, slowly sinking into the waters of the Great Salt Lake. Her friends understood. The new president is an integrationist Mormon from Salt Lake City. It is only after breakfast that Mother gets around to telling me that I received a telephone call earlier. She makes a face. She disapproves of the caller. He said for you to come see him. He said it was urgent. I deliver the message without comment. Who, Mother? Your friend, the Roman priest. Roman? Father Smith, she says, accenting father sarcastically. What did he want? He wouldn't tell me, only that you were to come to see him. Where? You'd never imagine. Well? He said he'd be down in the slave quarters. Now, wouldn't you know it? Know what? That that's where he'd end up. What do you mean? You know, says my mother, pushing her hand deep into her waist and arching her back. I think he's in with them. Who? I ask. You mean the guerrillas? So I told him in my sweetest voice that you were coming over here and going to church with me. I just dared him to say there was anything wrong with our Mass. You used to like him. She did. He was a favorite with the ladies. He had a courtly manner, used to look like Ricardo Montalban, playing a lithe priest and saying things like, "Do not worry about the bell, my children. God will provide the bell. You will see," etc. What have you got against him now? I asked Mother. He who is not with you is against you, says Mother darkly. Her eyes glitter. She's a bad enemy. Yes, well, I shiver in the sunlight. I notice that the vines are encroaching. A tendril has twined about Mother's antique wrought-iron singer table. Before we go to church, Dr. Dusty Rhodes hops the hedge. Yuki pours him a cup of coffee. Dusty and Mother hit it off very well, I notice. Dusty winks at me and feels my bones. Then he's got nothing against me. They both kid me. "Marva," says Dusty to Mother, but at the same time exploring my shoulder with his big freckled hand. "Do you think Tom's going to invite us white trash up to the big house?" Now he's gazing at Tara with his fond, filmed-over eyes. "Huh? What's that?" I ask. "He better, the scamp," cries Mother. "What big house?" I ask them. They both laugh merrily. I find that I am grinning too. But Dusty goes suddenly serious. He shakes his big lion head slowly. "You know, I'm leaving for Texas in a week, and I feel bad about leaving Lola over there alone. Do you know we haven't had a servant for a week? You don't know how lucky you are to have your little nigger." Mother rolls her eyes and raises her finger to her lips. "Yuki is a treasure." Yuki is worthless, but that is not what bothers me. "Guess who's going to look after my little Lola when I leave?" says Dusty past me. He and Mother are exchanging all manner of glances over my head. "I wish the child would move in with me." Again, a regular semaphore of eye messages. "She's not about to leave, Tara," muses Dusty. "She says her roots are there." "You should have seen her over there this morning, feeding her horses, planting greens." "Where is Lola now?" I asked them. "You'll see her this afternoon at the fish fry. It's all settled," says Mother. "But you should have seen her, standing there in that old garden, her hands potty black, her face glowing. She never looked prettier or more determined." "I still don't like to leave her there alone," says Dusty, wagging his head. "Do you remember what Scarlett said about the land?" asks Mother. "Or was it in the good earth?" "Yes," says Dusty, popping his great jaw muscles. Mother squeezes my hand. "We're making a foursome this evening, Tommy," she says in a strange soft voice, a rushing, low-pitched, thrilling voice, the sort women use on solemn occasions, funerals and weddings. "You and I and Dusty and Lola." Is something cooking between Mother and Dusty? And are they cooking up something between me and Lola? Warning signals flash in my brain. Look out, they're making a match. And yet, despite all, love kindles. Lola is a lovely girl, after all, and a brave girl. And what lovely sounds the Guarnerius makes clasped between her lovely knees. There are worse lives, after all, than sitting on the gallery of Terra and... I look at Terra, a preposterous fake house on a fake hill. Even the hill is fake, dredged up from the swamp by the state of Louisiana for Vince Marsalia. The very preposterousness of life in Terra with Lola inflames me with love. Yes, sitting on the gallery, sipping early times while Lola plants greens or plays Don Quixote, or we hold hands, her cello-calloused fingers whispering in my palm. Lovely Lola. The question is, how can I bear not to marry Lola? Why did God make woman so beautiful and man with such a loving heart? "Time for Mass," says Mother, rising briskly. "Won't you come with us, Dusty?" But Dusty, who is a Baptist, makes his excuses, socks himself in his joyful eccentric style, and hops the hedge. 2. We walk over to St. Pius XII. Pius XII, the last pope recognized by the American Catholic Church, was canonized by the Sacred College of Cicero, Illinois. The present pope of the ACC, a native of Anaheim and Bishop of San Diego, took the name Pius XIII. Property Rights Sunday is a major feast day in the ACC. A blue banner beside the crucifix shows Christ holding the American home, which has a picket fence, in his two hands. Mother sits up front with the other business and professional women. I skulk at the rear with the ushers, 1 foot in church, 1 foot in the vestibule. It is possible to leave at any time, since I told Mother I had to keep my appointment and might not see her after church. I can leave any time I please, but it is deliciously cool in here. The superb air conditioning always puts me in mind of the words of the old Latin Mass, to which the ACC has returned as a patriotic gesture. Grant us, we beseech thee, a locum refrigerii. Monsignor Schleifkopf reads the Gospel from Matthew that relates how Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man, believed in Christ and gave him his tomb. He preaches on the resurrection of Lazarus, who was also well off. Dearly beloved, we are reminded by the best commentators that Lazarus was not a poor man, that he lived comfortably with sisters in a home that he owned. Our Lord himself, remember, was not a social reformer, said nothing about freeing the slaves, nor are we obliged to. After the sermon, Monsignor Schleifkopf announced triumphantly that this week the congregation had paid off the debt on the new church, the air conditioning, the electronic carillon that can be heard for 5 miles, and the new parochial school. Moon Mullins, who is an usher, greets me in the vestibule. He stands around in true usher style, hawking phlegm and swinging his fist into his hand. Monsignor Schleifkopf prays for victory over North Ecuador and for the welfare of our brothers in Christ and fellow property owners throughout Latin America, and for the success of the Moonlight Tour of the Champs in the name of the greatest pro of them all. I begin to think impure thoughts. My heart, which was thumping for no good reason, begins to thump for love of Lola Rhodes, and at the prospect of seeing her this very afternoon and later inviting her out into the gloaming. When the congregation rises for the creed, I see my chance and slip out. Christ have mercy on me. Sir Thomas More, pray for me. God bless Moon Mullins, a good fellow, a better man than I. Lord have mercy on your poor church. Goodbye, Pius XII. Hello, Lola baby, big lovely cellist. Let us go out into the gloaming and lie in one another's arms and watch the constellations wheel in their courses. 3. Father Rinaldo Smith is sitting on the tin-roofed porch of the tiny slave quarter chapel. In his rolled-up shirt sleeves, he looks more than ever like Ricardo Montalban. He is waiting, I suppose, for his tiny flock. The Roman Catholics are a remnant of a remnant. We sit on the steps. "You know what we need, Tom?" he asks me with a sigh. "What's that, Father?" "A bell." "Right, Father. And I have an idea where I might lay my hands on one." "Splendid," says Father Smith, kicking a cottonmouth off the steps. Though Father Smith is a good priest, a chaste and humble man who for 25 years had baptized the newborn into a new life, shriven sinners, married lovers, anointed the sick, buried the dead, he has had his troubles. Once he turned up in the bed next to mine in the acute wing. It seemed he had behaved oddly at the 10 o'clock Mass and created consternation among the faithful. This happened before the schism, when hundreds of the faithful packed old St. Michael's. When he mounted the pulpit to make the announcements and deliver his sermon, he had instead fallen silent. The silence lasted perhaps 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a very long silence. Nothing is more uncomfortable than silence when speech is expected. People began to cough and shift around in the pews. There was a kind of foreboding. Silence prolonged can induce terror. "Excuse me," he said at last, "but the channels are jammed and the word is not getting through." When he absently blew on and thumped the microphone, as priests do, the faithful thought he was talking about the loudspeaker and breathed a sigh of relief. But Father Smith did not continue the Mass. Instead, he walked to the rectory in his chasuble, sat down in the Monsignor's chair in a grey funk, and, according to the housekeeper, began to mutter something about the news being jammed, whereupon the housekeeper, thinking he meant the TV, turned it on. Strange, no matter what one says, no matter how monstrous, garbled, unfittable, whoever hears it will somehow make it fit. Monsignor Schleifkopf later said to Father Kevin, the other curate, "Beware of priests who don't play golf or enjoy a friendly card game or listen to the Lawrence Welk show. Sooner or later, they'll turn their collar around and wear a necktie." This was before Father Kevin married Sister Magdalena and took charge of the vaginal computer in love. So there was Father Rinaldo Smith in the next bed, stiff as a board, hands cloven to his side, eyes looking neither right nor left. "What seems to be the trouble, Father?" asked Max, pens and flashlight and reflex hammer glittering like diamonds in his vest pocket. "They're jamming the airwaves," says Father Smith, looking straight ahead. "Causing a breakdown in communication, eh, Father?" says Max immediately. He is quick to identify with the patient. "They've put a gremlin in the circuit," says Father Smith. "Ah, you mean a kind of spirit or gremlin is causing the breakdown in communication?" "No, no, Max," I call out from the next bed. "That's not what he means." What Max doesn't understand is that Father Smith is one of those priests, and there are a good many, who like to fool with ham radios, talk with their fellow hams, and so fall into the rather peculiar and dispirited jargon hams use. When he said there was a gremlin in the circuit, he meant only that there's something wrong, not that there is, a spirit or gremlin causing it. Priests have a weakness for ham radio and seismology. leading solitary lives and stranded in places like Pierre, South Dakota, or the Bronx, or Waycross, Georgia, they hearken to other solitaries around the world, or else bend an ear to the earth itself. "Yes, they're jamming," says Father Smith. When I spoke, Max and the other doctors looked at me disapprovingly. They had finished with me, past my bed. I'm like a dancing partner who'd been cut in on and doesn't go away. "They?" asks Max. "Who are they?" "They've won and we've lost," says Father Smith. "Who are they, Father?" "The principalities and powers." "Principalities and powers, says Max, cocking his head attentively. Light glances from the planes of his temple. "You are speaking of two of the hierarchies of devils, are you not?" The eyes of the psychiatrists and behaviorists sparkle with sympathetic interest. "Yes," says Father Smith. "Their tactic has prevailed." "You are speaking of devils now, Father?" asks Max. "That is correct." "Now, what tactic, as you call it, has prevailed?" "Death." "Death?" "Yes, death is winning, life is losing." "Ah, you mean the wars and the crime and violence and so on?" "Not only that, I mean the living, too." "The living? Do you mean the living are dead?" "Yes." "How can that be, Father? How can the living be dead?" "I mean their souls, of course." "You mean their souls are dead," says Max with the liveliest sympathy. "Yes," says Father Smith tonelessly. "I am surrounded by the corpses of souls. We live in a city of the dead." "Are the devils here too, Father?" asks Max. "Yes, but you fellows are safer than most." "How is that, Father?" "Because you don't know any better," says the priest, cheering up all of a sudden. He laughs. "Do you want to know the truth?" "We always want to know the truth, Father," says Max gravely. "I think it is you doctors who are doing the will of God, even though you do not believe in him. You stand for life. You are trying to help us in here. You are good fellows. God bless you all. Life is what—" begins the priest, and, as suddenly as he laughed, now covers his face with his hands and bursts into tears. The doctors nod silently, pat the foot of the bed, and move on. But today at Natchez under the Hill, the priest is his old self, sits fully clothed and in his right mind, a gray-faced, gray-haired, gray man with flat, hairy forearms like Ricardo Montalban. He looks at his wristwatch and, explaining that it is time for him to go into the confessional, makes as if to rise. "Don't go on my account, Father," I say, noticing no other penitents. "No?" Sighing, he sits down again. "I'm sorry, Father, but you could not give me the sacrament of penance. One of the elements is missing." "Which element?" "Contrition, to say nothing of a firm purpose of amendment." "I understand. I'll pray for you." "Good." Pray for me." "Well, I haven't prayed much lately. But excuse me, Father." "Yes?" "I thought you wanted to see me about something." "See you? Oh, yes, right. It occurred to me the other day," says the priest, working his expansion band around his wide, hairy wrist, a Spanish athlete's football wrist, "that it would be a good idea for you to move out of your house." I look at him curiously. "Why should I do that?" "I am not at liberty to tell you why." "You mean someone told you something under the seal of the confessional?" "I'm just telling you that it would be better for you to leave. Now, today." "Is something going to happen, Father?" The priest shrugs. "Father, if my life is in danger, I think you're obliged to tell me." "You should move. Say, why don't you move down here with me? You know it's quite cool down here." He nods toward the restored slave quarters, a long brick row house already engulfed by creeper and swamp sorilla. "But, Father—" He rises. His parishioners are arriving. They're an odd lot, a remnant of a remnant, bits and pieces, leftovers, like the strays and stragglers after a battle. I know most of them. They recognize me and so signify by non-committal nods. Am I one of them? They are. 3 old-style Roman Catholics, the sort who are going to stick with the Roman Pope no matter what. Let's hear it for the Pope. Knights of Columbus types, 7-Up, Holy Name, Prudential, Western Auto types, and their wives, good solid chicken gumbo and altar society ladies. a scoffing Irish behaviorist, the sort in whom irony is so piled upon irony, jokes so encrusted on jokes, winks and nudges and in-jokes so convoluted that anti-clericism has become anti-anti-clerical, gone so far out that it has come back in as clericism and comes down on the side of Rome where he started. An old scold, a 70-year-old lady sacristan, the sort who's been lurking in the shadows of the tabernacle since the prophetess Anna. A love couple from the swamp, dressed in rags and seashells, who, having lived a free life, chanted mantras, smoked Choctaw Canab, lain together dreaming in the gold-green world, conceived and bore children, dwelled in a salt mine, chanced one day upon a Confederate Bible, read it as if it had never been read before, the wildest, unlikeliest doctrine imaginable, believed it, decided to be married, and baptized their children. An ordinary knothead couple recently transferred from Jackson, he the new manager of Friendly Finance, they having inquired after the whereabouts of a local Catholic church and being directed here, perhaps as a joke, and now standing around, eyes rolled up in their eyebrows, wondering, could this be the right church? A tin-roofed hut in a briar patch? They're in the wrong place. Two free jacks, light-skinned, slow-eyed men of color, also called Creoles by other Negroes, but generally called free jacks ever since their ancestors were freed by Andy Jackson for services rendered in the Battle of New Orleans. Two nuns who refused either to get married, quit, or teach in all-white knothead schools, and so have no place to go. Three seminarians, two lusty white fellows, lusty Notre Dame types, the sort who run up and down basketball courts, swinging sweaty Our Lady medals, and one graceful black youth, face set in a conventional piety, who reminds me of St. Aloysius Gonzaga, the Jesuit boy saint who was reputed never to have entertained an impure thought. Two secretaries from the center, you know the sort, good Catholic girls, 31 or 2, and not exactly gorgeous, one dumpy and pudding-faced, the other an olive oil. Everyone stands around at 6s and 7s, eyeing each other and wondering if he's in the right place. The love couple look at the KC types swinging their fists into their hands. The Friendly Finance couple look at the Free Jacks and wonder if they are black or white. Father Rinaldo Smith sighs and mounts the steps. The others follow silently. "You coming, Tom?" he asks. "Not today." "Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a good old bell to summon the faithful and ring the Angelus?" "Yes, I believe I know where a good old plantation bell might be found." "Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a good old bell to summon the faithful and ring the Angelus?" "Yes, I believe I know where a good old plantation bell might be found." "Grand." 4. In my enclosed patio. I decide to skip the fish fry and spend the afternoon sipping toddies and reading Stedman's account of Verdun. At 6 o'clock on the morning of May 23, 1916, the French 34th Infantry attacked the fort at Douaumont. The Germans had 2,200 artillery pieces, of which 1,730 were heavy. The French division advanced to the fort, losing 4 out of 5 men. The survivors reached the roof of the fort but could not get in. They were soon killed by artillery. The slaughter of Verdun was an improvement over the 19th century, in which, for example, Grant lost 8,000 men, mostly white Anglo-Saxon Protestants named Smith, Jones, and Robinson, in 40 minutes at Cold Harbor to Lee's army, also mainly Anglo-Saxon, white and Protestant, named Smith, Jones, Robinson, and Armstrong. Here's the riddle. Father Smith speaks of life. Life is better than death. Frenchmen and Germans now choose life. Frenchmen and Germans at Verdun in 1916 chose death, 500,000 of them. The question is, who has life? The Frenchman now who chooses life and will die for nothing? Or the Frenchman then who chose to die, for what, I forget? Or a Pennsylvanian? This afternoon, during the assault on Fort Douaumont, I heard a sportscaster listing the football powers of the coming season. Number 1 on his list were the Nittany Lions of Penn State. I do not care to hear about the Nittany Lions, but what would it be like to live in Pennsylvania and every day of your life hear sportscasters speak of the prospects of the Nittany Lions? With my lapsometer, I can measure the index of life. Life in death and death in life. It is possible, I suspect, to be dying and alive at Verdun and alive and dying as a booster of the Nittany Lions. An example of life in death. For 50 years following the Battle of Verdun, French and German veterans used to return every summer to seek out the trench where they spent the summer of 1916. Why did they choose the very domicile of death? Was their life here? Afterwards, they would sit for hours in a cafe on the Sacred Way. But I must prove my case. I must be present with my lapsometer in circumstances where the dying are alive and the living are dead. Observe, measure, verify. Here's the business of the scientist. Outside my enclosed patio, the weeds are sprouting through the black pebbles Doris brought back from Mexico. Virginia Creeper has taken the $500 lead statue of St. Francis she ordered from Hammacher Schlemmer. The bird bath and feeder St. Francis holds are empty. Tough titty for the titmice. Sunday night. Awake till 5 a.m. Reading Stedman on Verdun, listening to Screech Owl, crying like a baby in the swamp, assaulted by succubi, night exultations, morning terror, and nameless longings. Sipped 12 toddies. But why should I be afraid? Tomorrow, today, I meet with the director and hear the triumphant news about my lapsometer, the first caliper of the soul and the first hope of bridging the dread chasm that has rent the soul of Western man ever since the famous philosopher Descartes ripped body loose from mind and turned the very soul into a ghost that haunts its own house. Chapter 4. July 3rd. At the director's office to hear the good news about my article and invention. 11 a.m., Monday, July 3rd. 30 minutes early for my appointment. Quite nervous. But why? My article speaks for itself. The evidence is there. My invention works. There is time to go the roundabout way through Love Clinic in hopes of catching a glimpse of Moira, my love. No one is in but Father Kevin, who is sitting at the vaginal computer reading a book, Christianity Without God. Is it good? What? Oh! Yes, this is where it's at. He jumps up and greets me with suspicious cordiality, flashing his handsome Pat O'Brien grin and shaking my hand with both of his just as he used to when he was chaplain for the Knights of Columbus. He must have bad news. He does. Are you looking for Miss Schaffner? Yes. I'm afraid she's no longer with us, says Father Kevin, rocking back on his heels in his old clerical style. Where is she? She's working over in geriatrics with Dr. Brown. Very good, I say, but my heart gives an ugly leap sideways. But really, why should I be jealous? Buddy Brown is a licentious man, but Moira knows this. Undoubtedly, it is the hapless old folk who interest her and whom she wants to help. Thank you. Goodbye, Father, I say absently. Father Kevin frowns and returns to the vaginal computer. At the same moment, Lonesome Lil enters the clinic, lines up her lucite fittings on the table, and begins taking off her good gray suit. It does not help matters when I run into Buddy Brown in the hall. He greets me even more effusively. See you in the pit this afternoon, he says, coming close and pinching my flank in a loving kind of hate. The pit? At 2 o'clock. Me and you. Let's give 'em a real show, what do you say? Yes, but just now I have an appointment with the director. It's a good case. You saw him first, and I saw him. We both know him backwards and forwards. Which case? Oh, Mr. Ives. Which case? Ho, ho. Buddy twists my flank a bit too hard for comfort. Son, this time I got you by the short hairs. Perhaps. What do you think is wrong with him? I know what's wrong with him. And you've got him down for the Happy Isles. What would you do with him? I don't know. I'm gazing down at Buddy's tanned bald head and lustrous spaniel eyes. His jaw muscles spread up like a fan under the healthy skin. Could Moira like him? There is to commend him his health, strength, brains, and cleanliness. He is very clean. His fingernails are like watch crystals. His soft white shirt and starched clinical coat sparkle like snow against his clear mahogany skin. Burnished hairs sprout through the heavy gold links of his expansion band. Buddy is winking at me. I understand that you diagnosed, no pathology in Mr. Ives. Yes. You mean you think there's nothing wrong with him? Yes. Then how come he can't walk or talk? I don't know. Me and you gonna have it. All right. This time you're wide open. How do you figure? Because you've allowed non-scientific considerations to affect your judgment. Non-scientific considerations? Religious considerations. Aye, religious? How's that? Tell the truth. You oppose in principle Happy Isles and the euphoric switch. Yes, and you don't want Mr. Ives to be sent there. That's true. Why? Why what? Why do you disapprove? I fall silent. Tom, you and I don't disagree, says Buddy in an earnest, friendly voice. We don't? It's the quality of life that counts. Yes, and the right of the individual to control his own body. Well, and above all, a man's sacred right to choose his own destiny and realize his own potential. Well, would you let your own mother suffer? Yes. I don't believe you. I know you too well and know that you place a supreme value on human values. Yes. We believe in the same things, differing only in the best way to achieve them. We do? See you in the pit. One last squeeze, we are good friends now, and off he goes, white skirts sailing. The pit is a curious institution, a relic of medieval disputations and of doctors hankering for horseplay, satiric verse, heavy-handed clinical jokes and such. Once a month, a clinical pathological conference is held in the student amphitheater before 400-odd students, professors, nurses, and staff members. Local physicians are invited, and sometimes come, if only to see what the left-papasan psychiatrists and behaviorists are up to. Today's pit is the grand finale of the arduous 10-month school year. The seats of the pit slope steeply to a small sunken arena, a miniature of the bull ring at Pamplona. The pit is popular with students because it is the one occasion when the Herr Professors try publicly to make fools of each other and the students can take sides. Perhaps it is an Anglo-Saxon institution. No German Herr Professor would put up with it. They can clap, cheer, boo, point thumbs down, scrape their feet on the concrete. Contending physicians present and defend their diagnoses. Opponents are free to ridicule, even abuse each other. One doctor, none other than Buddy Brown, in fact, routed an opponent who had diagnosed the typical red butterfly rash of lupus by demonstrating that he, the opposing doctor, was colorblind. Buddy exaggerates when he says, "I have my following." Buddy exaggerates when he says, "I have my following." My one small success in the pit might be compared to a single well-executed estocada by an obscure matador. I was able to demonstrate that a lady suffering from frigidity and morning terror, and said to have been malconditioned by her overly rigid Methodist parents, was in truth terrified by her well-nigh perfect life, really death in life, in paradise, where all her needs were satisfied and all she had to do was play golf and bridge and sit around the clubhouse watching swim meets and the Christian baton twirlers. She woke every morning to a perfect husband, perfect children, a perfect life, and shook like a leaf with morning terror. All efforts to recondition her in a Skinner box failed. I thought they had got it backward, that the frigidity followed from the terror, not vice versa. How can a lady quaking with terror make love to her husband? For the first time I produced my lapsometer in the pit. Yes, the students know about my invention but are not sure whether it is a serious diagnostic tool or a theatrical prop. It registered normal readings in both the erogenous and interpersonal zones. The lady had a loving heart. Ah, but what to do about it? How to demonstrate it in the pit? An idea came to me. Sizing her up, noting her suggestibility, she was one of those quick, slim ash blondes whose gray eyes are onto you and onto what you want before you know it yourself, and are willing to follow your lead, a superb dancing partner. I gambled on a quick hypnosis, put her under, and implanted the post-hypnotic suggestion that she had nothing to worry about, that as soon as possible she should make an excuse and leave in search of her husband. Whereupon she did, waking up, rising with parted lips and a high color, patting the back of her hair and looking at her watch. "Good heavens, I'm late. I've got to meet Harry. This is his day off, and if I hurry, I'll be home before he finishes his nap." Exit, blushing. The students cheered and sang "I'm Just Wild About Harry." My little triumph, of course, was more theatrical than medical. As you well know, medical colleagues, and as Freud proved long ago, hypnosis is without lasting benefit. 2. 5 minutes to 11. Time for a last visit to the men's room. Why am I so nervous? The director has to be on my side, else how would Art Immelman have found out about my invention? Speak of the devil. A man takes the urinal next to me, though there are 6 urinals, and mine is at the end. I frown. Here is a minor breach of the unspoken rules between men for the use of urinals. If there are 6 urinals and one uses the first, the second man properly takes the 6th, or perhaps the 5th, maybe the 4th, tolerably the 3rd, but not the 2nd. This fellow, however, hawks and spits in the standard fashion, zips and pats himself and moves to the washstand, again the next washstand. In the mirror I notice it is Art Immelman, the man from the Rockefeller Ford Carnegie Foundations who looks like a drug salesman. "Well, well, Doc." When I turn to speak, I notice another minor oddity. In the mirror, which reverses things, there was nothing amiss, but as Art adjusts his trousers, I notice that he dresses on the wrong side. He dresses, as tailors say, on the right, which not one American male in 1,000, ask any tailor, does. In fact, American pants are made for left dressing. A small oddity, true, but slightly discommoding to the observer, like talking to a cross-eyed man. "Well, Doc," says Art, turning on the hot water, "have you thought about our little proposition?" "It's out of the question." "May I ask why?" "I wouldn't want my invention to fall into the wrong hands. It could be quite dangerous." "Don't you trust the National Institute of Mental Health and the Ford, Carnegie, and Rockefeller Foundations?" "No. Besides, my invention is not perfected yet. I haven't finished with it." "What's not perfected?" Art bends his knees, Mambo style, and combs his hair like a sailor with quick alternating strokes of comb and hand. "My sensors won't penetrate melanin pigment in the skin." Art wets his comb. "You mean your Moqual doesn't work on darkies?" "No, it doesn't." I look at him with surprise. "Darkies?" "Anything else wrong?" "Yes, I don't yet have a therapeutic component. As it stands, my device is a diagnostic tool, no more." "I know." Art goes on riffling his flat top with a wet comb. Is he trying to make it lie down? Some hairs stick up like a wet Airedale's. "What would you say, Doc, if I told you your invention has the capacities and is incremental for both components?" "Huh?" "That the solution to both the melanin problem and the therapeutic problem is under your nose." "Where?" Art laughs. "You know all I'm good for, Doc. I'm a coordinator. You've got the big ideas. I'm a tinkerer. In fact, I've got a little gadget right here that would fit your device." "Excuse me, I'm late. I've got to—" "We'd make it a team, Doc. All you've got to do is sign the funding application." "No." But we say goodbye and shake hands agreeably enough. He is curiously inert, as if all he knew about shaking hands he had learned from watching others shake hands. A heavy smell of sweat neutralized by deodorant pushes to my nostrils. Art holds my hand a second too long. "Doc, just in case anything should go wrong, I'll be around." "What could go wrong?" "Just in case." As I leave him, he opens his attaché case on the windowsill. He looks like a traveling salesman doing business in the post office. My hour of triumph is at hand. 3. In the outer office of the director, the typists do not look up, but the secretary is pleasant. She nods toward a bench. There are no staff members present. A row of patients, dressed in the familiar string robes of the wards, sit on the bench, hands on their knees. They look at me without expression. There is no place to sit but the bench. Quite correct of the director not to make a fuss. Yet it is an annoyance when one of the patients is called before me. I do not mind. The encounter with Art Immelman has left me thoughtful. Was he trying to tell me something? When my turn does come, the director greets me warmly, if somewhat vaguely, at the door. The first thing I catch sight of over his shoulder is, yes, my brain article and my lapsometer lined up side by side on his desk. "You are very imaginative," cries the director, waving me to a chair opposite him. "Thank you." What does he mean? The director is a tough old party, a lean, leathery emeritus behaviorist with a white thatch and a single caliper crease in his withered brown cheek. Though he is reputed to have a cancer in his lung that is getting the better of him, one can easily believe that the growth is feeding on his non-vital parts, fats and body liquors, leaving the man himself worn fine and dusty and durable as Don Quixote. The only sign of his illness is a fruity cough and his handkerchiefs, which he uses expertly, folding them flat as a napkin over his sputum and popping them up his sleeve or into the slits of his white coat. Though he is a behaviorist and accordingly not well disposed to such new ideas as an ontological lapsometer, I take heart from two circumstances. 1, that he is an honorable man of science and as such knows evidence when he sees it. 2, that he is dying. A dying king, said Sir Thomas More, is apt to be wiser than a healthy king. A dying behaviorist may be a good behaviorist. The director coughs his fruity cough. His eyes bulge. Handkerchiefs pop in and out of his pockets. With your permission, Tom, we're going to do a feature about your project in the Rehab Weekly. The Rehab Weekly? Yes. We think you've shown a great deal of imagination. Sir, the Rehab Weekly is the patient's mimeographed magazine. I know, says the director, his eyes bulging amiably. The unease that has been flickering up and down my spine turns into a pool of heat in the hollow of my neck. Strange, but I feel only a mild embarrassment for him. Sir, I say presently, perhaps you have misunderstood me. You say there are plans to do a feature on my work in the Rehab Weekly. Very good. But the reason I submitted my article to you was to obtain your approval and support before submitting it to Brain. Yes, yes, I know, says the director, coughing. It is also necessary to obtain your sanction of my application to NIMH for funding. Yes, in the amount of... The director is leafing through, not my proposal, but my medical chart. 25 million, I say, blushing furiously. Why am I so embarrassed? What is shameful about 25 million? I see. The director lays his head over, eyes bulging thoughtfully. You are on patient staff status. Technically, but doctor, don't you think that before launching such a major undertaking, it might be well to wait until you're discharged? Discharged? He slides the chart across the desk. According to our records, you are still a patient on A4, which means that, though you perform staff duties, you have not yet reached an open ward. I find myself nodding respectfully, hands on my knees, like a patient. I blink at my trousers. Where's my string robe? Sir, I left the hospital 5 months ago. Oh, left? The glossy eyes bulge, the pages flip past. He's lost me somewhere in the chart. Here, you're still on A4. No, sir. You're still on patient staff status. Oh, yes, sir, technically. I remember that. It is the first time in my experience that a doctor-patient on A4 has ever been put on patient staff. Remarkable. We have great respect for your abilities, Doctor. Let's see, you're in encephalography with Dr. Wilkes. How's it going? I was with Collie Wilkes 5 months ago. I noticed today you're down for the pit. I saw you once before, Doctor. Great. What'll it be today? High medicine or high jinks or both? You know, Doctor, if you could ever get on top of your mood swings, you have a real contribution to make. Again, poking through the chart. Too bad the Skinner box didn't do more for the anxiety and elation depression. I wonder if we hadn't better get on with implanting electrodes. Sir, excuse me, I believe I understand. Rather, there is a misunderstanding. You are under the impression that I am here as a patient, together with the other patients outside, for my monthly visit with you. Right, I'd forgotten. Monday is patient day. Oh, that reminds me. He consults his watch. I fear we're running a bit over, but don't worry about it. Always glad to see you. I predict you'll soon make A3 and permanent staff. For the time being, hang in right where you are. With Collie Wilkes. Tremendous fellow. A Renaissance man. We rise. There, lying on the desk between us like a dog turd, is my lapsometer. I can't bear to look at it. Neither can the director. But, sir, Dr. Moore, tell me the truth. Yes, sir. Do you think you are well? No, sir, I'm not well. Oh, well. He spreads his hands. My God, he's right. $25 million. An ontological lapsometer. I'm mad as a hatter. But the director suddenly feels so much better that, in an access of goodwill, he does look at my machine and even gives it a poke with his pencil. Amazing. What workmanship. Say, why don't you use it in the pit today? Where did you get it machined? In Japan, I say absently. You remember Dr. Yamauchi? The Japanese are amazing, aren't they? We reflect on the recent excellence of Japanese workmanship. What do you call this thing, Doctor? The director asks, exploring the device with his pencil. Lapsometer. I am unable to tear my eyes from his strong brown farmer's hands. The name interests me. Yes, sir. It implies, I take it, a lapse or fall. Yes, I say tonelessly. A fall, perhaps from a state of innocence? Perhaps. My foot begins to wag briskly. I stop it. Does this measure the depth of the fall? I stand up. Sir? Yes, Doctor. Am I to understand, then, that you do not intend either to approve my article for brain or my application for funding from NIMH? We'll cross that bridge at our next month's meeting. Right now, I'm more interested in the hijinks in the pit. And don't worry about being on A4 much longer. I believe you're ready for A3. Glad to have you aboard. You have no idea how hard it is to keep staff these days. Now, back at the old hospital in Boston... Sir? Yes? There is one thing I don't understand. What's that? I've gone past my 10 minutes. His glossy eyes bulge at his watch. Why did you tell Art Immelman you had approved my application? Who? Art Immelman. I never heard of him. He's a liaison man between NIMH and the funds. Oh, my, one of those fellas. Oh, they're bad news. They all say the same things. The war in Ecuador has dried up the money. He says Ford, Carnegie, and Rockefeller are willing to fund me. Good. He doesn't believe me. But you don't know him? Well, I steer clear of those fellas. For some reason, the director laughs immoderately, which in turn sets him off into a fit of coughing. Then you've told no one about my invention or article? Handkerchiefs pop in and out. The director, still red-faced, shakes his head and gazes past me. He has other patients. The next patient passes me in the doorway, a sorrowful, angry man in a string robe who stares at me furiously, tapping his watch with trembling forefinger. His cheek quivers with rage. I've encroached upon his time. Rage shakes him like a terrier. I recall being possessed by this demon. Once, after brooding 2 days over a remark made by a fellow patient, I walked up to him with clenched fists. I resent that remark you made 2 days ago. In fact, I can't stand it any longer. Take it back. Okay, said the startled man, and took it back. 4. My feet shuffle past the elevators, my hands groping for the pockets of my string robe. Where am I going? Back to the wards? The center is not holding. Where am I going? Back to my narrow bed on A4 with its hard mattress and seersucker spread stretched tight as a drum, a magic carpet where I can lie and wing it like a martin. Why is it I feel better, see more clearly, can help more people when I am crazy? Not being crazy, being sane in a sane world is the craziest business of all. What I really want to do is practice medicine from my bed in A4, lie happy and stiff on my bed like a Hindu on his bed of nails, and treat sane folk and sane doctors from the sane world, which is the maddest world of all. Where am I? Going past love. On the bench in the hall sit volunteers. J.T. Thigpen and Gloria and Ted and Tanya. J.T. strokes his acne with his fingernails. Gloria reads a textbook open on her plump thighs. Through the diamond-shaped window, I catch a glimpse of Father Kevin reading Commonweal at the vaginal console. "See you Wednesday," whispers Ted. "What's that?" "Oh." On the lower level, Buddy Brown and Moira are standing next to Mr. Ives in a wheelchair. Moira hangs her head. Buddy greets me with the cordiality of a good enemy. "You're just in time, Tom." "In time for what?" "To give Mr. Ives the once-over. Be my guest." "No, thanks." "Look at this." Taking a reflex hammer from his pocket, he taps Mr. Ives's knee tendon with quick, deft taps. Mr. Ives dances a regular jig in his chair. all the while watching me with his mild blue gaze. "Isn't that upper motor neuron damage, Doctor?" Buddy asks me. "I don't think so." "Try it yourself." He hands me his hammer, a splendid affair with a glittering shaft and a tomahawk head of red rubber. "No thanks." "What? Oh, then I'll see you shortly." "Fine." I do not speak well. I've lost. I'm a patient. But Buddy doesn't notice. Like all enemies, he puts the best construction on his opponent. But Moira knows something is wrong. She hangs her head. "Is something wrong?" she asks in a low voice. "I'm fine." I notice that they are waiting outside the tunnel that leads into the pit from the lower level. "Don't forget Howard," says Moira. "Who?" "Oh, Howard Johnson." "Nopes." "Who is Howard?" Buddy asks. "We can go now," whispers Moira. She sees the abyss and is willing to save me. "When will you come in?" asks Buddy. "Eins upon a onesie," I reply. "Okay. Eins, zwei, drei," says Buddy, willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. He's going to the men's room," he tells Moira, trying to make sense of me. "Reich," I say. "Rot's a rock." 5. So I go back to the men's room. At the washstand, there is a step behind me, a familiar smell of sebum sweat overlaid by unguents. "Hello, Art." Where did he come from? He must live in a cubicle. Now he's wearing a tie and jacket, as if he were dressed for an occasion. But where did he get the tie and jacket? I take a closer look in the mirror. It is a tight gabardine bi-swing jacket, a style popular many years ago with little plackets under each shoulder. "How does it go, Doc?" "Not so good. Win a few, lose a few, eh?" "What? Yes." I'm gazing at my face in the mirror intently, like the man in St. James's Epistle. The image reverses on the retina, and a hole opens. Removing the bottle of early times from my bag, I take 2 long pulls. "Where to now, Doc?" "I don't know. Back to A4. "As a patient?" "I suppose." "Do you give up easily?" I shrug. "What about our little proposition?" "What proposition?" "Let me see your moqual." "Gladly." Taking the device from my bag, I loft it toward the used towel bin. Art intercepts it, rubs it on his shirt front like a street urchin finding a dime. "You gotta have faith, Doc." "Faith?" "Listen to me for a minute." "Why?" "Sit here." Taking my arm, he leads me to the shoeshine chair. I sit on the platform. Art hops up to the throne and fits his shoes to the treadles. The whiskey catches hold in my stomach like a gear. I feel better, engaged. "And to make matters worse," says Art cheerfully, "somebody's beating your time with your girl." "Beating my time?" I haven't heard that expression since childhood. "What do you want?" I ask him, slumping around the pleasant, engaged gear in my stomach. "To show you something." He hops over me, fumbles in his attaché case, which still lies open on the windowsill. It is a short barrel, like a telephoto lens, fitted with an adapter ring. He screws it onto my lapsometer. "Life is funny, Doc." "It is." "There is such a thing as being too close to the woods to see the trees." "What is that thing?" "It's really your discovery. The principle is yours. This is just a bit of tinkering. If you want to give me credit and a footnote..." "What's it for?" "Doc, the trouble with your invention has always been that you could diagnose but not treat, right?" "That's right." "Now you can treat." He tosses me the lapsometer. "How's that?" "Don't you know? You discovered it 20 years ago." "What?" A behaviorist comes in to take a leak. Art begins combing his hair again, wetting his comb and bending his knees mambo style. The behaviorist washes his hands, nods at me, and leaves. Art hops nimbly up into the shoeshine chair. "Doc, you recall that you discovered the effects of heavy sodium fallout?" "Yes." "I'm wondering, if 2 drinks of early times makes me feel good, wouldn't 3 drinks make me feel better?" "You have the answer, don't you see?" "See what?" "The possibility of treating personality disorders with heavy sodium and chloride." Oh, that would be like exploding a cobalt bomb over New Orleans to treat cancer. "That's the point. How do you treat cancer with cobalt radiation?" I've thought of that, but you know, of course, that sodium radiation is a two-edged sword. In the same moment that you assuage frontal terror, you might increase red nucleus rage. Exactly! Art's feet fairly dance on the treadles above my head. And you, of all people, should know how to avoid that. How? With this. What is that? A differential stereotatic emission ionizer. Beams in either your heavy sodium or chloride ion, using your principle. How? Don't you see? You don't even move your Moqual. Say you take a reading at the red nucleus and find a +5 millivolt pathology. All you do is swing your dial to a -5 chloride charge and ionize. And what will that do? Tranquilize red nucleus rage. Sure. You don't believe me? Where are you going? To get a drink. That's the point, Doc. Drink this drink and you'll never want to drink. Let me show you something. What? Sit down here. As I sit on the lower platform, Art holds the machine to my head. It feels like barber's clippers. Now, using your diagnostic circuit, I observe that you are registering a +3 on the anxiety scale. A little high, but not unusual considering the pace of modern living. Now, suppose I keep the Moqual in place and switch over to a +2 ion emission. You should feel a bit worse. The machine hums like a tuning fork against my head. I begin to shiver. My shoulders are rounded, and I'm gazing at my hands clenched in my lap. At last I raise my eyes. A horrid white light streams through the frosted window and falls into the glittering porcelain basins of the urinals. It is the terror, but tolerable. The urinals, which are the wall variety, are shaped like skulls. The dripping water sounds hollow, like water at the bottom of a well. Now, we'll reverse and give you a -7 chloride dose, which should throw you over into -2 anti-anxiety. My head is leaning against the metal support of the treadle. Again the machine hums. When I open my eyes, I am conscious first of breathing. Something in my diaphragm lets go. I realize I've been breathing at the top of my lungs for 45 years. Now my diaphragm moves like a piston into my viscera, pulling great drafts of air into the base of my lungs. Next, I become aware of the cool metal of the support against my neck. Then I notice my hand clenched into a fist on my knee. I open it slowly, turning it this way and that, inspecting every pore and crease. What a beautiful, strong hand. The tendons, the bones. But the hand of a stranger. I've never seen it before. How can a man spend 45 years as a stranger to himself? No other creature would do such a thing. No animal would, for he is pure organism. No angel would, for he is pure spirit. Feeling better, Doc? Yes. It's quite a device, isn't it? Yes. And the director doesn't appreciate it, does he? No. Now, Art is at my head again, fiddling about, pressing bony protuberances, measuring salience of my skull with a cold metal centimeter scale. It feels good to be measured. I'm going to show you something I think will interest you. I'm going to stimulate Brodmann 11 mildly. You know what that is? Yes, but I'd like to hear what you think it is. It lies in the frontal temporal sulcus, of course, betwixt and between the abstractive areas of the frontal and the concrete auditory radiation of the frontal. It is the area of the musical erotic. That's not my terminology. But you know what I mean. Here the abstract is experienced concretely, and the concrete abstractly. Take women, for example. Here one neither loves a woman individually, for herself and no other, faithfully, nor does one love a woman organically as a dog loves a bitch. No. One loves a woman both in herself and insofar as she is a woman, a member of the class women. Conversely, one loves women not in the abstract, but in a particular example. This woman loves her truly, moreover. One loves faithlessly, but truly. Truly. Loves her as one loves music. A woman is the concrete experienced abstractly, as women. Music is the abstract experienced as the concrete, namely sound. So, old stuff to you, eh, Doc? Well, that's not the end of it, don't you see? Stimulate this area, and you stimulate both the scientist and the lover, but neither at the expense of the other. You stimulate the scientist-lover. I see. But it is Art himself who interests me. How does Art, who looks like the sort of fellow who used to serve as condom vendors in the old auto age, know this? So that in the same moment one becomes victorious in science, one also becomes victorious in love. And all for the good of mankind. Science to help all men, and a happy, joyous love to help women. We are speaking here of happiness, joy, music, spontaneity, you understand. Fortunately, we have put behind us such unhappy things as pure versus impure love, sin versus virtue, and so forth. This love has its counterpart in scientific knowledge. It is neutral morally, abstractive, and godlike. Godlike, in the sense of being like a god in one's freedom and omniscience. You surprise me, Art. Hold still, Doc. Again, the cold steel hums like a tuning fork against my skull. The tone of the tuning fork turns into music. First, a plaintive little piping, the dance of happy spirits in a high meadow. The flute trips along, hesitates, picks up again. And here's the beauty of it, in the catch, the stutter, and starting up again. Now comes the love music of man in particular for women in general. Happy, faithless, seductive music. The race and rip of violins dancing, whipping, tricking, fizzing in a froth of May wine, sunshine, sunshine, and cotton dresses in summertime. Who am I? I am he who loves. I am in love. I love. Who do you love? You. Who is you? A girl. What girl? Any girl you please. You. How can that be? Because all girls are lovable, and I love them. I love you. I can make you happy, and you me. Only one thing can make you happy, and it is not that. Love makes me happy. Knowing makes me happy. Love is God, because God is love. Knowing God is knowing all things. Love is not God. Love is music. Who you talking to, Doc? What? Why don't you sit down? What was I doing? It doesn't matter as long as you feel good. Art pushes up the frosted window. We gaze out into the gold green. Fat white clouds are blown by map winds. Swallows dip. Cicadas go zree. You look good, Doc. Look at yourself. You're not a bad-looking guy. You're still young. You got a good build if you took care of yourself. Here, wash your face in cold water and comb your hair. He hands me his pocket comb. Now, no need to look like a hairy elf. In a flash, he produces a pocket clippette, clips the hair in my nose, ears, and eyebrows. Your fingernails, and gives me a manicure on the spot. In 2 minutes, my nails become glossy watch glasses like Buddy Brown's. Art comes close and sniffs. Pardon, Doc, but you're a little high, you know. Here's a man's deodorant. Now. Art gazes at me. I gaze at the gold-green summer. How do you feel, Doc? Fine. Isn't it better to feel good rather than bad? Yes. Isn't it better to be happy than unhappy? Yes. How can you take care of unhappy patients if you're unhappier than they are? Physician, heal thyself. Yes. Your terror is gone, you're breathing well, your large bowel should be slack as a string, clear as a bell. How is it? Slack as a string, clear as a bell. Okay, Doc. Now what? I don't know. What? Well, what is the purpose of life in a democratic society? A democratic society? I ask him, smiling. Sure. Isn't it for each man to develop his potential to the fullest? I suppose so. What is your potential? I don't know. What? Doc, you have two great potentials. A first-class mind and a heart full of love. Yes. So what do you do with them? Well, I don't know. What? Know and love. What else? Yes. And win at both. Win? Is there anything wrong with being victorious and happy? With curing patients, advancing science, loving women, and making them happy? No. Use your talents, Doc. What do you know how to do? I know how to use this. I pick up the lapsometer. What can you do with that? Make people happy. Who do you love, Doc? Women, knowing, music, and early times. You're all set, Doc. One last thing. Yes? Where is your crate of moqualls? In a safe place. Let me have them. The situation is critical, and I think we ought to get them in the right hands as soon as possible. No, I'd better not. That is not part of our contract. Why not? There are dangers. I can't be too careful. What dangers? Physical and political dangers. What do you mean? I think you know what I mean. If one of these falls into the wrong hands, it could produce a chain reaction in the heavy sodium deposits hereabouts, or a political explosion between the knotheads and the lefts. Do you realize that the president and vice president will be here tomorrow? Realize it? Why do you think I want your moqualls? Coming close, he opens and closes his wallet, giving me a glimpse of a metal shield. FBI? A bit more exalted. Let's just say I make security reports from time to time. That's why we're interested in making sure your invention stays in the right hands. This seems a bit far afield from your work with mental health and foundations. Oh, everything's interdisciplinary now, Doc. As well as being third-generational, you understand. No, but don't worry about my invention. Okay, Doc. Now, sign here. He nods to the contract on the windowsill. A ballpoint pen leaps to his hand, clicks, and backs toward my chest. Very well. Standing at the windowsill, which seems to be his place of business, I sign the blue-jacketed contract. You won't be sorry, Doc. All in one motion, he takes pen and contract, clicks pen, stuffs both into his inside breast pocket. As usual, he stands too close, and when he buttons his coat, it exhales a heavy breath. Now you can use your talents for the good of mankind and the increase of knowledge. All you have to do is never look back and never be sorry, as per agreement. As per what agreement? I ask vaguely, frowning. But my colon is at peace, and my heart beats in time to Mozart. We're in business, Doc. Yeah, let's have a drink. What? Oh, well. The bottle of early times passes between us. The whiskey catches hold in my stomach, gear engaging gear. Art chokes, his eyes water. That's good stuff, says Art, blinking. I could swear it was his first drink. Yes, I say, laughing. It's like being back in Charlottesville in the spring in the men's room at a dance at old St. Anthony's Hall. 6. The pit is in an uproar. Students roost like chickens along the steep slopes of the amphitheater, cackling and fluttering their white jackets as they argue about the day's case. Bets are placed, doctors attacked and defended. The right-wing knothead Christian students occupy the right benches, the left's the left. The lower reaches are reserved for professors, residents, consultants, and visiting physicians. The director, for example, sits in the front row, elbows propped on the high retaining wall, next to his fellow Nobel laureate, Dr. Kenneth Stryker, who first described the branny cruciform rash of love. Gottlieb is directly behind them, erect as a young prince, light glancing from his forehead. His eyes search mine with a questing, puzzled glance, seeking to convey a meaning, but I do not take the meaning. In the same row sit Dr. Helga Heine, the West German interpersonal gynecologist, Collie Wilkes, the super-Negro encephalographer, and his wife Fran, a light-colored behaviorist and bird watcher, Ted and Tanya, and 2 visiting proctologists from Paradise, my old friend Dr. Dusty Rhodes and Dr. Walter Bung, an extremely conservative, albeit skillful proctologist recently removed from Birmingham. The pit itself, a sunken area half the size of a handball court and enclosed by a high curving wall, is empty, save for Dr. Buddy Brown, the patient, Mr. Ives, in a wheelchair, and behind him a strapping blonde nurse named Winnie Gunn, whose stockings are rolled beneath her knees. Where is Moira? Ah, I see. Sitting almost out of sight in the approach tunnel, with no more of her visible than her beautiful gunmetal legs. Is she avoiding me? I enter not through the tunnel, but from the top, walking down the steep aisle like a relief pitcher beginning the long trek from the left field bullpen. As I come abreast of successive rows of students, there occurs on the left a cutting away of eyes and the ironic expression of the fan confronted by the unfavorite. These are by and large Buddy's fans, and mostly qualitarians, equals euthanicists. From here and there on the right comes a muted cheer, a vigorous nodding and lively corroborative look from some student who remembers my small triumph and imagines that he and I share the same convictions. I don't pay much attention to left or right. Students are, if the truth be known, a bad lot. En masse, they're as fickle as a mob, manipulable by any professor who will stoop to it. They have, moreover, an infinite capacity for repeating dull truths and old lies with all the insistence of self-discovery. Nothing is drearier than the ideology of students, left or right. Half the students here revere Dr. Spiro T. Agnew, elder statesman and the honorary president of the American Christian Proctological Society. The other half admire Hermann Hesse, Dr. B.F. Skinner, inventor of the Skinner conditioning box, and the late Justice William O. Douglas, a famous qualitarian who improved the quality of life in India by serving as advisor in a successful program of 100 million abortions and an equal number of painless terminations of miserable and unproductive old folk. People talk a lot about how great the kids are compared to kids in the past. The only difference, in my opinion, is that kids now don't have sense enough to know what they don't know. On the other hand, my generation is an even bigger pain. It seems today, in the pit, I am favored by the Christian knothead anti-euthanasic faction, but I'm not sure I like them any better than the Hesse-Skinner-Douglas qualitarians. But I do not, on the whole, feel bad. My large bowel is clear as a bell. My celiac plexus is full of blood. Anxiety flickers over my sacrum, but it is not the terror, rather a useful and commensurate edginess. What I fear is not nothing, which is the terror, but something, namely, getting beat by Buddy Brown in front of Moira. Otherwise, I feel fine. My heart is full of love. My mind is like a meat grinder, ready to receive the raw stuff of experience and turn out neat patty-cake principles. The thing to do, it occurs to me halfway down into the pit, is to concern myself with the patient and what ails him and forget the rest. In the pit itself, a casual air is cultivated. Mr. Ives's bright monkey eyes snap at me. Buddy Brown leans against the high wall talking to the director, who hangs over, cupping an ear. Nurse Winnie Gunn, who stands behind the wheelchair, gives me a big smile and shifts her weight, canting her pelvis 6 degrees starboard. Moira? Her face swims in the darkness of the tunnel. Are her eyes opened or closed? The uproar resumes. The doctors are free to unhorse each other by any means, fair or foul. The students are free to boo or cheer. Last month, one poor fellow, a psychiatrist who had diagnosed a case as paranoia, was routed and damned out of his own mouth, like Captain Queeg, by Buddy Brown, who led the man to the point of admitting that, yes, he was convinced that all the students and the faculty as well had it in for him and were out to get him. Jeers from the students, right and left, who have no use for weakness in their elders. The door opens at the top, and in strolls Art Immelman and perches in the back row. In the same row, but not close, sit 2 women. The 2 women are, good Lord, my 2 women, Lola Rhodes and Ellen Oglethorpe. What are they doing together? There is no time to speculate. The uproar subsides, and Buddy Brown begins, flipping through the chart held above Mr. Ives, who sits slumped in his string robe, head jogging peacefully, monkey eyes gone blank for once and fixed on the wall in front of him. Buddy presents the medical history, physical examination, and laboratory findings. He stands at ease, looking fondly at Mr. Ives. My differential diagnosis: advanced atherosclerosis, senile psychosis, psychopathic and antisocial behavior, hemiplegia and aphasia following a cerebrovascular accident. Murmurs and nods from the students. Doctor? With a flourish, Buddy hands me the chart. The early Times is turning like a gear in my stomach. I'm looking at my hand again. What a hand. Doctor? Yes. Oh, by the way, Dr. Brown, you made no therapeutic recommendations. Buddy spreads his fingers wide, shrugs an exaggerated Gallic shrug. He is part Cajun and comes from Thibodeau. You have no recommendations? Do you, Dr. Moore? Then you plan to transfer him? Yes. Where? To the Happy Isles Separation Center. This is what the students have been waiting for. Euphoric switch, cry the euthanicists. Button, button, cry the right benchers. Not to Georgia. Where would you send him, Doctor? Asks Buddy sarcastically. The heavy, warm gear is turning in my stomach. My hand is the hand of a stranger. Music is still playing. I must have swayed to the music because Winnie Gunn has seized my forearm with both hands. Are you all right, Doctor? She whispers. Fine. We are still waiting for your diagnosis, Dr. Moore, says Buddy with the gentleness of victory. I found no significant pathology. Louder from the back benches. The director cups his ear. I said I found no significant pathology. No significant pathology, says Buddy as gently as Perry Mason beating Hamilton Burger for the 1000th time. And what is your recommendation, Doctor? Discharge him. "Discharge him," repeats Buddy. "He can't walk or talk, and if he could, he would presumably return to his former atrocious behavior. And yet you want to discharge him. As cured, Doctor?" "If indeed there was anything wrong with him." "You think there was nothing wrong with him?" "No, that is, yes." "Then what's he doing here in a wheelchair?" Titters. I shrug. "Dr. Moore, what do you think his chances are of recovering from his stroke?" "You mean assuming he's had one?" "Very well, assuming he's had one." "Very small." "And if he did recover, what are the chances he'd return to his former mode of behavior?" "Very large." "Do you recall his former behavior?" I am silent. "Allow me to refresh your memory, Doctor." Again, Buddy flips through the chart. "These," he explains to the amphitheater, "are progress reports during the last year of the patient's residence at the Golden Years Senior Citizen Settlement in Tampa. I quote, "The subject has not only refused to participate in the various recreational, educational, creative, and group activities, but has on occasion engaged in antisocial and disruptive behavior. He refused shuffleboard tournament, senior softball, Golden Years Gymkhana, Papa Putt-Putt, Donkey Baseball, Guys and Gals A-Go-Go, the Redfish Rodeo, and Granddaddy Golf. He refused free trip to Los Angeles to participate in Art Linkletter III's The Young Olds, even though chosen for this trip by his own community. Did on 2 occasions defecate on Flirtation Walk during the Merry Widow's Promenade." This book is